If I'd known the overnight cleaning shift at the office would end up with me locking myself in the supply closet, listening for footsteps I couldn't see, I'd have just called out sick. At first it sounded perfect. A little extra cash for covering the Friday graveyard shift, no managers around. Just me and a cart of supplies. The building was an old insurance agency set back from the main road, all gray stone and stained glass. Everyone said it used to be a church, but you can never tell with these places. I told myself that's why it felt odd at night. Too much empty space, too much leftover quiet. I started off in high spirits, the kind that come from thinking you're alone and nothing can bother you. There was the soothing whir of the floor polisher, the faint lemony smell of disinfectant, and somewhere in the ductwork, the soft tick of old pipes settling. The cleaning checklist was straightforward. Wipe down the desks, empty the trash, vacuum the weirdly echoing conference room. Even the bathrooms weren't as gross as I'd feared. For the first hour it felt like any other job, except for the way my footsteps bounced back at me, sharper than usual. After emptying the break room bin, I noticed something off. The row of mugs above the sink, 6 of them, all printed with cheesy corporate slogans, were turned backwards, handles pressed to the wall. I didn't remember seeing them like that before. I figured maybe the day shift cleaner had a system. I turned them back, just out of habit, and moved on. The next weirdness came when I was vacuuming the west hallway. That part of the building was always colder, the floor sloping slightly, so my cart kept drifting. There's a wooden door at the end, heavier than the rest, with a rusted push bar. As I passed it, I caught a whiff of something off, like old incense, cloying and sour. I paused, convinced I heard breathing on the other side. Not loud, but slow and regular, as if someone was leaning close to the door, trying not to be heard. I shut off the vacuum and held my own breath, straining to hear. The air felt thick, like the building was waiting for something. But after a moment, there was nothing, just the faint hum of the vending machine in the lounge behind me. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was the pipes again, and forced myself to move on, rolling the vacuum back toward the main office. The clock over reception read 1:55 a.m., the minute hand twitching. I noticed the paintings on the walls looked different in the low light, their landscapes blurred, as if the trees in them were shifting. I knew it was just shadows, but every time I glanced back, I could have sworn the paintings had changed position slightly, like someone nudged them with a shoulder. I tried not to look too long. At 2:13, I was wiping down the copy room when I heard footsteps upstairs. That made no sense. This was a single-story building, but above my head, slow and deliberate, came the unmistakable creak and groan you hear in old houses when someone walks across hardwood. The sound dragged from one end of the ceiling to the other, then stopped right over where I stood. My hands froze, clutching the rag. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the HVAC system, or a raccoon in the crawl space. I even went outside to check the roof with my flashlight, heart tripping, but saw nothing but the starless sky and the damp stain of a recent rain. For a while after that, things settled. I put in my earbuds, told myself I was being jumpy, and tried to focus on my job. The normalcy was almost reassuring, until I returned to the reception area and found the row of mugs turned backward again, just as I'd first seen them. I stood there, staring at the mugs. Had I really turned them back around, or just thought I did? I replayed that moment in my mind, fingers cold around the spray bottle. I was sure I'd turned them. The sense of being watched crept up the back of my neck, so I tried to laugh it off, muttering something about cleaners' ghosts under my breath. I decided to call my girlfriend, just to ground myself in something normal. Out back by the dumpsters, I pressed the phone to my ear and studied the building. The stained glass windows were dark, but I could just make out the colored shapes, deep blue and muddy red, warped by decades of dust. She didn't answer. I got her voicemail, left a quick message about being bored and maybe a little spooked, trying to sound casual. The wind picked up, carrying a sharp mineral smell, almost metallic, and I hurried back inside. When I walked into the main hallway again, the air felt oddly close, like the walls had contracted a little. I noticed something new, a sticky residue on the polished tile floor, leading from the heavy wooden door at the west end, across the hall, and stopping abruptly at a blank stretch of wall. The trail was faint, but undeniable, glistening under the fluorescence. I crouched down, touched it, and drew back fast. It wasn't sticky exactly, but left a cool tingling on my fingertips, as if it had been there for hours or seconds. I wiped my hand on my pants and checked the door. Still locked, push bar unmoved, but the doorknob felt icy beneath my palm. I told myself it was some spilled cleaning product. Maybe the day shift cleaner had dropped something, and I just never noticed. But that didn't explain why. When I glanced back down the hall, the residue was gone. No streak, no shimmer. Just clean, cold tile, as if nothing had ever been there at all. I began to feel like the building was playing tricks on my senses. Little things shifting at the edge of my vision, always snapping back to normal when I looked directly at them. Trying to shake off the crawling sensation under my skin, I forced myself to keep moving, ticking off tasks from my checklist. I restocked toilet paper. I wiped fingerprints from the glass doors. Every now and then, I caught myself pausing, listening hard, convinced I could hear something just beyond the buzz of the lights. Soft, rhythmic tapping that seemed to move from room to room. At one point, I convinced myself it was the pipes again, but when the tapping started up right behind me, in the empty break room, I nearly dropped my bucket. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the sound of the fridge humming, and the faint lemon scent clinging to the air. I decided it was time for a snack, anything to break the pattern and get my mind right. I pulled a bag of chips from the vending machine. The bag crunched in my shaking hands as I walked back toward the supply closet to grab a new bottle of glass cleaner. I pushed open the door and stopped dead. The closet light was on. I was sure I'd turned it off. Same as always, to save electricity. Even more unsettling, the shelf with the cleaning bottles looked wrong. The bottles were arranged in a perfect line, each one label facing outward, grouped by color. I never organized them like that, and the day crew never bothered either. A sudden cold draft brushed past my ankles, making me flinch. I stepped back, heart in my throat, and closed the closet door, pressing my palm to the wood until my breathing slowed. It was 2:47 a.m. I told myself to finish up, just power through, clock out, and never volunteer for this shift again. I hustled back into the reception area, trying to ignore the feeling that every step echoed just a little too loud, that each fluorescent tube buzzed with its own anxious frequency. The checklist kept me anchored. Disinfect lobby surfaces, tidy the magazine rack, mop the last stretch of tile. I was halfway through wiping down the front counter when I heard something from the west hallway, a slow scraping drag, as if something heavy was being pulled along the floor. This time, I didn't freeze. Maybe adrenaline overrode common sense, or maybe I just wanted to end the suspense. I grabbed the flashlight off my cart and started down the hallway, every surface looking gray and strange in the beam's glow. The scraping stopped before I'd taken 5 steps. The silence was absolute, my own breathing roaring in my ears. I pressed the beam to the heavy wooden door. The air here was different. Thicker, colder. I could smell something faintly sweet and rotted, like wilted lilies left in a vase too long. My hand hovered over the push bar. I told myself I would just check the door, see that it was still locked, and be done with it. But the door was ajar. Not wide, barely more than a finger's width, but enough for a gust of cold to brush out. Enough to see that the darkness inside was absolute. I stood there, unable to decide if I should pull it open or shut it tight. Somewhere deeper inside the room, something moved. A shifting shadow, or maybe just my own reflection in the glass behind me. I pushed the door shut, the latch clicking like a pin dropping in a cathedral. The lights flickered, casting the hallway and stuttering, broken sequences of bright and dark. I backed away, skin prickling, telling myself it had to be a draft, maybe a structural issue. But the hallway felt different now. Longer, almost as if the walls had stretched, absorbing my footsteps. The paintings seemed to lean in, their painted trees crowding the frames. That's when I heard the voice. Not words exactly. A hushed, broken muttering, like someone trying to pray but forgetting the language. It came from everywhere at once, echoing in the vents and vibrating through the floor. I turned and ran, nearly tripping over my own feet, the flashlight beam jerking across the walls. I only stopped when I reached the supply closet, slamming the door behind me and twisting the lock. Inside, the light glared down, too bright, revealing every scuff on the linoleum, every speck of dust. My pulse thrummed in my wrists. I tried to call my girlfriend again, but the phone was dead. Screen black, even though I'd charged it before my shift. I pressed my back to the shelves, staring at the space under the door, half expecting to see fingers curl into the gap. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. The only sound was the whir of the ancient ventilation system, filtering an air that tasted like copper and old stone. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I'd dozed off, dreamt the whole thing. Maybe the old building was just settling, its ancient bones creaking as the temperature dropped. But then, the tapping came back. Louder now, an insistent, irregular rhythm that started on the door and moved up the wall, tracing the outline of the closet as if searching for a way inside. My skin crawled at the sound, the hairs on my arms standing on end. Shadows pressed against the crack beneath the door, stretching and recoiling in time with the tapping. I pressed my hand to my mouth, forcing myself not to make a sound. I tried to count the taps, but each time I started over, the pattern changed, skipping,